longevity lifestyle designers. This is Govin here with secretsoflongevity.com. So something you've probably noticed over the last few months is I'll occasionally be doing videos that don't fall into the typical category of health that, if you've been a long time viewer of mine, would fit into what I've done in the past. Now, this has just been an increasing interest of mine, and my intention for this channel is to actually broaden the scope of what I talk about. Now, I remember back when I first started putting content online, I was writing articles at first. It was when I created my own website, which, by the way, is in dire need of a huge overhaul. So I occasionally get people asking me questions relating to articles I have up on there, and also just other things up on the site there. And I'd suggest just ignoring the site for now. I'll let you guys know when a new one's up and it's looking a little more up to date. And essentially, when I was trying to figure out what it was I was going to be doing online, I knew it was in the realm of health. I'd been studying health in the holistical fields for a number of years at that point, and I wanted to be teaching the concepts I knew about. And I hadn't decided on one set topic within this broad range of health that we can define. And so I was looking at different terms. I was looking at anti-aging, creating a YouTube channel around that kind of concept, creating one that's more about perhaps traditional Chinese medicine. And I settled on the keyword longevity, and then through searching what were popular word combinations with the term longevity, I found Secrets of Longevity as something that had been searched quite a lot as a set term. So I've kind of got the market cornered in terms of keyword searches for Secrets of Longevity and perhaps some other keywords that linking with the word longevity. Something that I was surprised by when I started doing that, creating this list of keywords all with the word longevity in it, is I had to go through and take out a lot of words that were applying to finances. So people often use the term longevity for wealth management and their portfolio and all these other financial buzzwords that get tacked onto longevity. And at the time, that wasn't something I was interested in the slightest. I just didn't address it at all. So this is my introduction and explanation as to where I'm going to be heading with this channel, which is talking maybe anywhere from 1/4 to 1/3 of my content on financial topics. And if you find that not up your alley, you simply don't have to watch those videos. I think they're going to be very cutting edge in the sense that I'll be talking about things that don't generally reach people's mainstream understanding of things. Of course, if you are closer friends with me online, you would have seen I talk about this all the time on Facebook, on my personal profile. So you kind of probably have a sense of the kinds of things I would be talking about and that I'm referring to. And what I really think is going to be key here is that wealth and health are inextricably linked. When one is hampered or falling behind the other, it affects the other. So if you just don't have a lot of resources in your life, you can't put much emphasis on your health when it comes to things in addition to the basics. So yes, there's a lot we can do with our health with just honing and adhering to a healthy basic lifestyle. But when we want to start adding on the extra stuff and even doing things like buying just organic food, that costs a bit extra. You need to have the means to be able to do that. So the more wealth you have, the more you have the means to be able to engage in these things. And as time goes on, we're going to see emerging technologies, which, if you're young enough, you might see a time when they come down in price. But for those of us that are further along in life, we might want to use those therapies earlier than other people, and they're going to cost money. So you have to have the resource to be able to do that if you're looking for long-term, very sustainable health. And then, of course, in reverse, if you don't have good health, it's hard to build wealth. It's hard to be good at your job. It's hard to thrive and make money in life and support yourself, let alone a whole family, if you're not relatively decently healthy. So you always hear that term, health and wealth and well-being. So that's going to be incorporated more into this channel. And I'll be changing that disclaimer at the beginning of my videos as well, but I just want you to know that I am not a financial professional. I'm not a licensed stock broker or any type of advisor, so this is simply my take on things, just like I'm not a health professional in the sense of being a licensed medical practitioner of any kind. This is all my take on things, and you choose to adopt what it is you do in your life. And you just take it as tips that you hear and that you choose to take full responsibility in making any changes to your own life through that knowledge. So this video I want to talk about the idea of diversification of wealth or assets or what have you. And this is important because a lot of people think that they have diverse portfolios and that type of thing when they don't. So a lot of people know of the term, you don't put all your eggs in one basket. So what this might look like is you have a financial advisor that is part of some bank and they're licensed by the government and they can only offer and recommend certain things, and they have to follow set guidelines set up by their bank but also set up by the government, which is designed to supposedly be the safest thing to do in terms of not risking the assets that you give them to manage. For example, I don't know the difference between the US and Canada, but I know that there's some laws about how much gold and precious metals in terms of raw commodities can be bought by a stockbroker. I think it's in the realm of 5%. It can probably change depending on the region that you live in, but you can't ask them to put 30% of your portfolio in precious metals. But there's certainly ways of doing that, but you have to not rely on just your stockbroker to manage certain aspects of your wealth. What we've seen increasingly in the past decades are bubbles that have been created in different industries, and then those bubbles pop and collapse very quickly. Through healthy economic systems that we don't really see much of anymore, there's rise and falls of industries, but they don't suddenly collapse in a bubble that is really quite catastrophic to people's investments and finances and the businesses that suffer from that. So you saw that in the stock market collapse in '87. You see that in the dot-com collapse in the late 90s. And you saw that with the credit and housing collapse in the US, which greatly affected the entire world. There's a lot more volatility happening in Western economies, less so in the Asian market economies, but they're also quite tied in with the West in various ways. So what does happen here happens over there in sort of reverberation. And I'm not going to pretend that I'm knowledgeable enough or experienced enough to start making pronouncements about what could happen in regards to economic collapses, but there is a certain amount of consensus about the US dollar that underpins almost all of the world's economies, and if that collapses, that would be very catastrophic. But there's also ways of preventing yourself from experiencing the detriments should that occur. And just like any kind of preventative care when it comes to health, and also when it comes to survival, because you've heard me talk about survival skills, you need to take the same approach when it comes to your finances. So not having all your eggs in one basket, and by that I mean all backed by one currency. Even though you might have property, you might have stocks, you might have a business that you own and or manage, these things, if they're all centered in the Western economy, they're all sitting on this sand of the US dollar. So what some very unique economic thinkers have suggested is internationalizing your wealth as you build it and as you move forward. And it can also be a method of creating wealth by going to places in the world where there's more opportunity, which just simply does not exist anywhere near to the degree that it used to in the West. So some telling signs that there's a clampdown in Western nations on people wanting to move their assets out of their country is the increase in legislation and policies that limit this. So in various countries, there's increasing capital controls. If you keep up to date on the news, you'll know about this. It's happened in Canada within the last year, with banks being able to bail in should a crisis occur in that bank. It looks very similar to what happened leading up to the crisis in Greece. I don't think the Canadian economy is on as shaky ground as Greece was, but just the fact that they're putting that in place is concerning. They just passed something recently in the UK where the government can go into people's bank accounts to take money if they owe taxes. Those have existed in the US for quite a while already, I believe. And in the recent past, FATCA, which I'm not going to attempt to remember what that stands for, but I'll stick it up on the screen here, and that essentially greatly limits the ability for a number of things, but one of them being Americans internationalizing their assets in terms of getting bank accounts, foreign bank, offshore bank accounts happening. The one way you can get your money outside of the U.S. is by buying property overseas, and that's untaxable. But as any expatriate knows, that's still connected to the U.S., so has moved abroad but is still an American citizen, they know that they have to pay taxes to the U.S. plus the country they're living in, if that country has taxes that apply to them. So a lot of people are starting to give up their American citizenship because these increasing draconian laws are foretelling of the direction the country's headed in. The U.S. has been plummeting on the Fraser Institute's yearly breakdown of the most economically free countries in the world. And, you know, this is all just writing on the wall. The more you can get the possibility of being more of an international citizen as opposed to being stuck in one country, gives you that opportunity to get out of Dodge if that were to be the case that you have to do that. I'm trying not to be a doom and gloomer here, but, you know, tragedies happen in countries, and they have for all of history. You don't need me to list off the different periods of time of, say, the Russian Revolution, the Chinese Revolution, Germany pre-World War II, any country where there's been problems that have happened. There's people that get out of the country leading up to that problem, and there's the people that have the blindfolds on and end up going into the meat grinder, per se. Whether they actually physically end up dying at the hands of their government, or if they just have all their assets taken from them, if they have any kind of damage from a collapse in that economy that happens to them. It might not be a physical taking of anything, but it could just be that the climate of their economy just goes to complete shit. So you have to take that into consideration. And just having this idea of self-defense, personal self-defense, whether, you know, if we talk about health, you want to live a long time, you need to know how to some degree, defend yourself should your life be threatened. That's a very basic first level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, is being able to defend yourself in a crisis situation. Well, the same applies to finances. And this was a very broad video in that sense, and they'll probably do videos on more specific topics within this concept in the future. But you need to start looking at ways of having money in different places. There's banks all around the world. There's countries that have higher ratings for the quality of their banks, from Switzerland to Singapore, Hong Kong, Panama, and these places have better ratings than the US and even Canada nowadays. And there's ways of getting into them even if you're an American. Maybe not Swiss banks if you're American, but there are ways. And there's also other ways of getting money out through other forms. And I would highly recommend checking out the YouTube channels as well as all the other work that Doug Casey, Jeff Berwick, and the Nomad Capitalists have done. I'll actually just link to their YouTube channels below. Doug Casey's really pioneered these ideas of internationalizing yourself. He's been writing about that since the 70s. And also using global opportunity to your advantage. And it's through being more open to the world at large that we can accrue more life experience and a healthier view of the world, because it's not as dark as people tend to try and make you think it is, at least the mainstream media. We can feel confident and safe that should the shit hit the fan, we have a means of at least having our wealth protected, and then it's just a means of getting out of the country should things start looking pretty grim. Now, what I would also recommend doing is looking at getting a second passport, or even a tertiary passport. There's a number of ways to go about doing this. 3 main ways, plus maybe 2 other ways that are not as realistic for most people. So the first 3 are, number 1, buying a passport. There's a number of countries that you can buy passports in. It requires a large donation. It's usually a 6-figure type donation to a certain country, whether it's various Caribbean countries, That's not always the best thing for people, especially if you don't have the money. Sometimes they just want you to purchase property, so yes, it might be an overvalued property, but at least you're getting something in return for that investment. Plus you get the passport once you've purchased that property. And these are anywhere from a few months to up to a year to be able to do this. There is, of course, naturalization, which is applying to go live in a country. Sometimes you have to have proof that you have a job that you're going in there, or you have to have proof that you have enough assets that you can live off. And there's many countries that it's a very short period of time that you can do this, from places like Panama, Uruguay, Paraguay. But there's also longer term ones. But of course you can do this in almost any country. It's just the terms get longer and longer. Switzerland, it can be up to 15 or 20 years of living there before you can become a citizen. And this is stuff that these 3 channels talk a lot about. I'm by no means an expert on that, but I've followed enough of their content for long enough that it's very desirable to do things that way. Another way, of course, is through your bloodline. If you have immediate family in your past that live somewhere else, you can often get a passport that way. I'm applying for a UK passport because my mother was born in England, and that's something I'm eligible for. Sometimes you can even do that with several generations back. If your family has lived in one country for a while, but they came there from somewhere else many generations back, sometimes you could still do that. I believe Ireland works like that, but it might not anymore. And the benefits of a UK passport is you then have the whole European Union. You're open to going to live without a visa, work anywhere without a visa. So if for any reason you need to leave and get over somewhere else, you have that option. Now Europe and North America are quite tied into each other economically, so if shit's hitting the fan in one place, it's generally also happening in the other. So you also want to look at, if you are going the naturalization route, my recommendation would be somewhere in South America or out in Asia. That's just the reality that these economies are separate enough that if there's a problem happening in one, you can be in the other. So this is really just a surface introduction to this concept. Again, I'll be talking about this in the future. Thank you for watching this video. If it interests you, let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, favorite, and share the video if you feel so inclined. And with that, I'll talk to you next time. Take care and embrace life without limits.